two, turkey, check.
Okay. You ready? Okay, go ahead.
Page 638. בת ואין צורכם כמו בעבר. דרו יקרא לבן אם בת ואין צורכם כמו בעבר. נעים שמכם ולא יושבת, שבו ונוחו ביום שבת, שבו ונוחו ביום שבת. לבן אם בת ואין צורכם כמו בעבר. דרו יקרא לבן אם בת ואין צורכם כמו בעבר. אם שמכם ולא יושבת, שבו ונוחו ביום שבת, שבו ונוחו ביום שבת.
Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos to all of you. It's nice to see you at the end of a beautiful week. We didn't get enough rain. We never get enough rain. But I'll tell you, after days like this, I don't miss Chicago. The weather has been gorgeous, and it's so nice to be among friends and fellow CBS members. Some of you I haven't seen for a little while, so if I haven't seen you for a little while, some of you have come as far as the Netherlands to be with us tonight. So I'm happy for all of you who are here to welcome in Shabbat. So Audrey is here from the Meadows along with Kathleen, and Audrey is going to honor us by lighting our Shabbat candles. So Audrey, if you would come on up to the bima. The rest of you can follow along on page 120 in your prayer books.
I shall escort you. Would you like an escort? Fine, be that way.
She doesn't need your help. How dare you? you did. Well, you look like you're doing well to me.
I was being chivalrous. Chivalrous.
Whoops.
Whoa,
Uh-oh.
what happened?
Wait, I got it.
Did I knock it off?
No, you're good.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kachanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Oh, my
Amen.
God. Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We're going to continue with L'chadodi on page, Gordy, you may actually.
138 is my
138,
guess.
page 138. And as you may know, we're going to do the first two stanzas and then the second two stanzas at the end when we do the fourth stanza. Please rise and face the door as we symbolically welcome in the Sabbath bride.
That would be 1 and 2 and 8 and 9 in your books. 138, 139. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad yishmianu. El hamyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad shemu tiferet v'litila lechadodi lechadala pnei Shabbat nehekapela lechadodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nehekapela likrat Shabbat lechuvenelcha ki mekor habracha merosh mikerem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat achila lechatodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela lechatodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Number 8. Yamin usmol tiferti v'et Adonai tariti ayad ishben parti v'nismecha v'nagila lechatodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela lechatodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom hateret balagam b'simcha uvetzola tochemune am segula boi chala lechadodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela lechadodi likrat kala pnei Shabbat nekabela yalai la 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 yalai la 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 yalai la 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 yalai la 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 yalai la la yalai la la.
Page 144. I mentioned last week that the Hatsui Kadish, or maybe 2 weeks ago, that the Hatsui Kadish in some ways represents a kind of semicolon that separates one section of the service from the other. We've done some of the several preparatory prayers and songs, and now before we get to the Baruch Hu, which is the really first part of the service that is obligatory. Traditionally, according to Jewish law, we have this pause here where we do the Hatsui Kadish. Many of us know the mourner's Kaddish, but there are lots of different versions of Kaddish. This is the shortest one. That's why it's called the half Kaddish or the Hatsui Kadish. But it's really meant just to give us an indication that we're leaving one section behind and entering into another. So Gordon, would you lead us in?
Sure. Yitkadav yitkadash shemei Rabbah B'yama divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon u'v'yom echon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael Bagala u'vizman kariv v'imeru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mavarach La'olam U'Olamei Almaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yithalev V'yithalal Shemei Dekudesha Barichu V'hela Min Kol Berchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiram B'yama V'imru Amen.
Page 146.
Lai la 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 lai. Lai la 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 lai. Lai la 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 lai lai. Lai la 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 lai. Lai la 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 Baruch hu et Adonai Hamivorach Baruch Adonai Hamivorach Le'olam va'ed Hamivorach Le'olam va'ed.
Please join me at the top of page 149 as we read together in English the translation of Ma'ariv Aravim. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. And let's read together again at the top of page 151. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol lavavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavacha hayom al levavecha ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לתותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 157. Emet ve'emunah kol zot, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Page 158.
Yum bum bum bim bim bye yabba bye bye bim bum. Yum bum bum bim bim bye yabba bye bye bim bum. Ya la 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 yabba bye bye bim bum. Ya la 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 yabba bye bye bim bum. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osef velet. Nora tehilot osef velet. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha. Okei hayam lifnei Moshe uMiriam. Zeli anu ve'amru. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osef velet. Nora tehilot osef velet. Yam bam bam bim bim bye yabba bye bye bim bam. Yam bam bam bim bim bye yabba bye bye bim bam. Ya la 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 yabba bye bye bim bam. Ya la 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 yabba bye bye bim bam.
Please join me at the top of page 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, Allene ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim.
Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Ufros aleinu sukat ברכת שלומך. Amen. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Amen.
We continue on page 164 with the Amidah. Please rise. We're going to do the first three blessings together and then continue on our own. Please be seated when you have finished.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot v'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo B'Yahava. Melech Uzeru Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rab L'Hoshia. Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechaye HaKol B'Rachamim Rabim. Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayem Emunato L'Shenei Afar. Michamocha ba'gevurot, u'midom melach, melech me'mit u'mechayeh, u'matzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman atah lahachayot hakol, baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalalu chasela. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Yehiyu l'ratzon imrefi v'hegyon libi lefanecha. Page 180. Yehiyu l'ratzon imrefi v'hegyon libi lefanecha. Adonai Tzuri, Adonai Tzuri, Adonai Tzuri v'goali. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav. Oh, say shalom bimromav. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav. Oh, say shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav. Oh, say shalom bimromav. Ve'imru. Amen.
At this point in our service, our thoughts turn to those in need of healing on this Shabbat, healing of body, healing of spirit, and healing of heart. And we ask God to bestow the bracha, the blessing of refuah shlema, full and complete healing on the following men and women from our CBS community or those known and loved by those in our congregation. Lynn Feingold, Ilana Massey, Kevin Brackett, Michelle Camisia, Joshua Hyman, Dylan Bonnick, Diane Butler, Elsa Loach, Jesse Friedman, Scott Stern, Tom Sabo, Yolanda Galaz, Beverly Eigner, Carl Rice, Michael Kasson, Ed Eston, Roger Widman, and Marjorie Gilberg. And if anyone has a name they wish to add, please do so. The Misha Berach is on page 511.
Misha Berach Avoteinu Kor HaBracha Le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishe Berach Imotenu Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos once again, and great to see all of you, especially those I haven't seen for a little while. The Torah portion for this week is called Emor, and it occurs toward the end of the book of Leviticus, the third book in the 5 books of Moses, chapters 21 through 24, if you're interested. And as I've taught during Torah study, the book of Leviticus, in many ways, is a book written by priests and for priests. And many modern Bible scholars actually think this particular book was written by a different set of authors, probably priestly authors, compared to the authors of the book of Genesis or Exodus or the book of Deuteronomy. I like to talk about it as a kind of inside baseball book. You know, if you're not a priest, you're probably not going to resonate with a lot of the ideas here. And if you're not a priest, you may not even understand some of what they're talking about here. Almost like when my brother-in-law talks about some baseball statistics that I've never even heard of before. And I'm a baseball fan. Now, this Torah portion, like many, contains some very problematic passages and ideas for modern Jews. This one maybe even more than many, because it occurs in the book of Leviticus. First of all, as I think many of us know, only men can be priests. And this Torah portion makes that idea very clear. And to many modern people for whom the principle of egalitarianism is critically important, that right off the bat is a problematic idea. Only men can be priests. But not only if you're a man, you have to be born into the house of Aaron. So it's a hereditary system. If you are born in the house of Benjamin or Judah or any of the other tribes of Israel, you cannot be a priest. No matter how spiritual you are, no matter how well educated you are, no matter how good you are with people, no matter how prayerful a person you are, you have to be born into the house of Aaron. And again, for many Reformed Jews, particularly in the early Reform movement, this idea was anathema. The idea that to achieve the highest spiritual office in the Jewish religion, it had nothing to do with your merit. It was nothing you could achieve. You just had to be born into it, like princes and princesses in systems that have monarchies. And a lot of the early Reform rabbis said, we don't want this. We don't want a caste system in modern Judaism, so they got rid of it altogether. Now, has anyone grown up in an Orthodox congregation? Did anyone grow up in a more traditional background? Maybe not anyone. Robin? Well, I don't know how conservative it was, but in Orthodox shuls, there's a moment during some of the services where they invite all the priests or people who claim to be descended from the house of Aaron to come up to the bima. I don't know if you guys had this, and they would offer the priestly benediction over the entire congregation. Did they do that where you were? And they would put taluses over their heads? You had to be, a Cohen means priest. So if their last names were Cohen, or if it was similar to Cohen, they would sometimes come forward. And even if you didn't have that, in a lot of even conservative synagogues, the aliyahs, the sections of Torah that you would read on Saturday morning or during the High Holy Days, were broken up again in this caste system. The lowly Israelites, of which I'm a member, got the least desirable Torah portions. If you were descended from a Levite, you got better ones. And if you were descended from a Cohen or a priest, you got the best ones. So the early Reform movement found this caste system very problematic and got rid of it together. This Torah portion talks about that. It also talks about some ideas that we may not be as familiar with. If you're the high priest, like Aaron, or those who came after Aaron, the high priest was not allowed to attend his own parents' funeral. the Bible is much more concerned with issues of purity and impurity than issues of righteousness and sinfulness, which is what the rabbis were interested in. They were interested in righteousness and transgression. In the Bible, the priests in particular were much more concerned with whether you were pure or impure. And if you came near a dead body, that was considered something that made you impure, to such an extent that if you were a high priest, you could not even be near your mother and father after they passed away. The high priest could not marry a widow or a divorcee. And he was only allowed to marry a virgin from another priestly family. So if you were a high priest, you couldn't marry anyone who was divorced. You couldn't marry anyone who was mourning the loss of a husband. And it had to be a woman within your same basic tribe, and that woman had to be a virgin. Another idea that seems kind of problematic to us, why would you punish a divorcee? Why would you punish a widow? You could not be a priest if you had any kind of defect, physical defect, or handicap. If you were blind, you couldn't be a priest. If you had a humpback, and it's very specific, and we'll be looking at that tomorrow morning at Torah study, you couldn't be a priest. If you suffered from dwarfism, if you were a dwarf, if you were overly short, you could not be a priest. So again, these are ideas that are anathema to modern ears. Many of us probably know family members, friends, colleagues who have physical challenges, but who nevertheless are very spiritual, are very intelligent, could achieve great things in their lives. And then finally, if you were a daughter of a priest and you had unsanctioned sex, and there were lots of categories about what unsanctioned, unapproved of sex was, you would be burned. Now, talk about problematic ideas. I think many of us have seen on the news or read about honor killings in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in India. Well, here in our own Torah, we have an example of an honor, not an honor killing, but an honor burning. So again, these are just a few of the many ideas in this particular Torah portion that are very problematic to modern people, modern Jews, when we read them. Now, needless to say, as I said, most of us find these ideas troubling. And the question arises, how should we handle passages like this in the Torah? And they're not limited just to this Torah portion. What about the Akedah, the story of the binding of Isaac that we read every single Rosh Hashanah morning, where God tells Abraham and Sarah to slaughter, to sacrifice their only son Isaac. And even though in the end, Abraham doesn't have to go through with it, the mere fact that God commands him to do that, and that Abraham, along with the complicit Sarah, is willing to do it, is very problematic. And yet we read it on one of the holiest days of the Jewish year. Or the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where even though there are a few righteous people, God still obliterates these two cities in the book of Genesis because of the iniquity of others. So there's this idea of collective guilt, where two cities are wiped out, the guilty along with the innocent. Or episodes of ethnic cleansing. We have that in the Torah. We have episodes of genocide. All you have to do is read the book of Joshua, the very first book after the book of Deuteronomy, when the Israelites cross the Jordan River, enter the land of Canaan, and do battle with Canaanites and Philistines. There is great slaughter during the conquest of the city of Jericho, and in many other scenes during this very bloody book. Same with the book of Judges and many others. So how do we deal with these problematic passages that we continue to read, most of us, for centuries and centuries and centuries? I can think of 4 basic ways that we can deal and that we have chosen to deal with these kind of passages. One is we can simply skip over them. When we read them at a bar bat mitzvah, during the high holy days, on Shabbat, we just skip the problematic passages. Most of us don't understand Hebrew very well anyway, and we're probably not going to miss it. So you just, for those who know Hebrew, just skip over those problematic passages and pretend they're not there. Another is we can delete them. If our Torah scrolls get old and torn and we need to commission a scribe to write a new one, just write a new Torah scroll or publish a new Chumash, a new Hebrew Bible, and just delete all of those scenes. Get rid of the Akedah. Get rid of this Torah portion. Get rid of the Sodom and Gomorrah episode and practice a kind of cancel culture that a lot of us are well aware of today, and that's a very controversial issue. What do we do with statues of presidents in this country and founding fathers who were slaveholders? Do we change the name of schools? Do we get rid of statues built in their honor? That's another way we can handle these problematic ideas. Just cancel them. Get rid of them. Another is we can apologize for them. And I have many friends in the Orthodox and traditional community who do just that. And they try to apologize for God telling Abraham to slaughter his son, or for the Sodom and Gomorrah episode, or for the behavior of Israelites when they were confronting enemies. And they say, well, this was all bad, but we have to understand it in its time. And even though we think slavery is bad, the fact that Jews themselves had slaves in the book, in the Torah, is acceptable, because other people had slaves at that time too. And I'm not saying that's a bad position, but it's a position that doesn't work for everyone, because it leads to cultural relativism, where we sort of whitewash the bad behavior of the Jews who came before us, because we say, who are we to judge the behavior of our ancestors who lived so many centuries before. And then finally, the last way that I can think of to deal with these kind of problematic passages is to reinterpret them. Reinterpret the Akedah in a different way. Rabbis do that in their sermons frequently during the High Holy Days. Reinterpret the Sodom and Gomorrah episode, and don't focus so much on the fact that these cities were wiped out, the guilty along with the innocent, and focus instead on the fact that Abraham challenged God and was provocative and audacious. And that's the lesson that we really should take away from the episode, and just kind of, ignore the other stuff. So we can reinterpret these in ways that make them relevant and resonant with us. So I want to know and I just want to take a few minutes with this. I'd like to know what you think is the best approach, or what you have done in your years of being a Jew, or going to services, or studying. What are ways that have worked for you? What do you do when you read a problematic passage? How do you make sense of it? How do you respond to it? Or do you just kind of let it go and ignore it? Do any of the 4 ways I mentioned make sense, Ellen? And just make sure you speak right into the mic. I know, you know how to use it. Not everybody does.
Well, I think this is like what we're dealing with now with what they call critical race theory. I think it happened. It was at a time that we did not understand, we would not understand today. And so we have to accept that for them at that time, this was the right thing. It doesn't have to be right for us. There's a lot of stuff in the Torah and the Bible that I surely don't believe in. But I don't think you should cancel it, because we're talking and trying to learn, or trying to make sense, and maybe you can't make sense of it. We didn't live in those times. I can't make sense of slavery, but I didn't live in those days. So I think that for me, I just accept that this was the way of the world in those days, and thank goodness the world has evolved. And hopefully human beings will evolve.
Thank you. And I think that's part of the reason, since modernity, since the Enlightenment, that we have different denominations in Judaism. We have Reform, we have Conservative, we have Reconstructionist Judaism, we have the Renewal Movement, secular humanism. Different Jews at different times try to respond to the tradition, including some of the rituals and teachings and passages that they find problematic in different ways. And Robin, go ahead.
Well, I find myself at times questioning, why are we still reading the same book every year over and over again? But then I return to the feeling of faith, the feeling of there's more to Judaism than the words. There's the shuckling, there's the music, there's the community, and there's something nurturing about soul food, soul words, history. It's an underpinning of our faith, even though the words might not make sense today, as Ellen was saying. The continuity of continuing to do them. And I love that every time we read a passage, you come up with a new way to look at it and to interpret it, to make it today.
We try. Thank you. And you talk about soul food. There's a new movie. Has anyone seen a movie called The Survivor on HBO? It's a true story about a Jewish boxer, a guy who was forced to fight at Auschwitz and survived and wound up coming to Brooklyn and became a prize fighter for a while, and who actually fought against Rocky Marciano. It's a good film. Ben Foster is in it, who actually is Jewish. But during one of the fights where he's fighting against one of his best friends at Auschwitz, the guy knows he can't win, and he said, just kill me, say Kaddish for me. And neither of them are religious, neither of them believe in God, and yet the Kaddish, as it probably is for many of us who say it for family members, for parents, for grandparents, for siblings, even if we don't believe in God, because the Kaddish, if you actually read the translation, is all about God. Praise God, extol God, glorify God, and even people who are atheists find the Kaddish nurturing, just like this character in the film. And I think you're right, Robin. A lot of these traditions, whether you agree with them or not, whether you're an atheist or a believer, you can still find great comfort in them, even in some of the stories that seem pretty troubling. Kathleen will give you the last word.
Well, I think one of the best things about Judaism is we're commanded, I think, to wrestle with these things. And I think that's what reinterpreting does, refocusing. On the Akedah, what I think an alternative is that child sacrifice was going on in the cultures all around. And by God's abrupt saying, don't do it, that's a huge change in Judaism compared to everything else that was around. And child sacrifice has persisted in some places to this day.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that is one of the only ways for modern people to understand a story like that. Why, if you believe in God, and not all of us believe in God, but if you believe in God, why would God ask Abraham and Sarah, the world's first two Jews, to sacrifice their son? And as you say, one way of interpreting that is to send a clear message that in the end you're not going to have to do this, and you're not going to have to sacrifice children anymore. Early Judaism continued to sacrifice, but it was animals, not people. And then, of course, with Rabbinic Judaism, that was completely eliminated, although there are still some fringe groups in Israel who want to bring back animal sacrifice. And I would just say one more thing to close. We have a whole post-biblical tradition of commentary and interpretation. After the Bible was canonized, after the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the temple and wiped out the priesthood, the rabbis reinvented Judaism. And you've heard me talk about this many times. But the books that they wrote, the Mishnah in the 2nd and 3rd century, the Talmud in the 4th, 5th, and the 6th century, the great medieval codes, and the tradition of commentary and midrash and interpretation that continues to this day is, I think, one reason we are still around, and why we are still vibrant, and as you say, Kathleen, why we are still wrestling with the tradition in a way that brings us into a place like this on a Friday night. I mean, yes, we want to see our friends and our neighbors, but hopefully we also want to get a little bit of inspiration from a tradition that has animated our people for 6,000 years. So thank you for your comments and insights, and for those of you who want to study this in more depth, come tomorrow morning to Torah study. We are going to continue with the Allene Prayer on page 586. Please rise.
Allene לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. I have the honor now of inviting up board member Judy Nystrom to read some important announcements to you tonight. You're welcome. You're walking better and better.
I'm walking good.
Yeah, better and better.
Thank you, thank you. Of course, tomorrow, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Tomorrow, Saturday, the 4th, Rabbi will be leading Torah study at 10:30 a.m. And in the evening at 5, 5th through 7th graders and their parents will be gathering for moving traditions here at CBS with other near congregations. Naz, do you want to talk about moving traditions for 2 sentences?
I can just really quickly, Moving
Yes, really
Traditions
quickly.
is a program for teens right around bar and bat mitzvah age, and it's just sort of a community-based way of helping to educate them about their tradition and also form bonds between different congregations. So I don't know who's coming from Petaluma or from Sonoma, but they've been invited.
It's very nice. Okay. Religious School and Shorashim will both resume on Sunday, May 15th. Soul Sisters Book Club will be reviewing A Paragon, I believe, by Colin McCann, May 16th with Martha Pascan at 4 p.m. on Zoom. This is important. Mark your calendars for May 20th, Lag Bomer Shabbat with a bonfire onik. You can RSVP online via the calendar at any time. If you have not yet bought your tickets for comedy night, please make sure to do so as ticket sales close this Sunday. And we wouldn't want you to miss out because it's going to be
fun.
lots of fun. You can pre-purchase not only your tickets, but wine, beer, or sparkling water. And we have a professional comedian, Jeff Applebaum, and Rachel Berman. If you have any questions or need help with purchasing tickets, please contact Maxine Maluso. We'd also like to give warm wishes to this week's birthdays and anniversaries. Happy birthday to Dana Simon, Charla Ranganum, Morgan Rendau, Elias Wilmert, and Kelly Decker. And I want us all to give a special happy birthday to Zach Snyder. His birthday is Monday, and he's going to be 36 years old. Happy anniversary to Michael and Barbara Cosson, Richard and Wendy Zitter, Jason and Mary Lures. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Zach, I didn't know you were going to be 36. That's a big number in Judaism. That's double chai, 2 times 18. And supposedly the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, the founder of this very important mystical movement, had his great revelation at age 36. So you have a lot in store for you this year. Our thoughts now turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people, whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We remember those who have died during the past 12 months. Jimmy Rabb, Sandra Somek, Michael Gordon, Larry Elson, Arnold Trombler, Erica Cornelison, Gladys Shubin, Richard Magano, Clark Smith, Stephanie Rabb-Axner, David Ernesto Kaplan, Pat Pate, Annette Goldberg, Maggie Sherman, Sandra Benko-Fichtenberg, Nicholas Huff, George Montano, Dean Wilson, Norman Charney, and David Alpert. We also remember and honor the Yartsites, the anniversaries of the deaths of Leona Padrid, Dr. Ian Miller, Bruce Jeffrey Cohen, Bernard Wine, Paul Newman, Kate Levin, Joseph Persillet, and Arnold Bremler. And if anyone has a name they wish to add, please do so. The Mourner's Kaddish is on page 598. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei rabbah b'alma divra cherete v'yamlech malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael b'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabbah mivarach le'alam olmei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalal shmei dekudsha b'richu Le'ela min kol birchata shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who are in mourning, and comfort to all those who are bereaved. And let us all say, amen. Please be seated. As you said, Robin, this is soul food. I don't know who's mourning tonight, but again, whether you believe in God or not, the Mourner's Kaddish really resonates with lots of people and gives them the nourishment they need often when we're feeling sad and lonely. So we have a final song before we do Kiddush and Motzi. And Gordon, what do you have for us tonight?
We'll do an oldie but a goodie, 626. Ein Keloheinu. One of Mark's requests.
Oh, okay.
Mark's not here tonight. Oh, Mark is
He's
here.
right there.
There you go. See that? I'm thinking of you even if I
Is that
don't
how
know you're here.
your shul used to end services, with Ein Keloheinu? Every time. Yep. It's traditional.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Keloheinu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi Kemalkeinu, Mi Kemoshienu, No del Eloheinu, No del Adonenu, No del Malkeinu, No del Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu.
Please rise. We are going to do the, not the complete Kiddush, but the longer version of Kiddush on page 123. We did it a couple weeks ago, and a lot of people like it. So, Gordon, would you lead us in that?
Okay.
Page 123.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu Zicharon lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikraye kodesh zecher l'tziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'charta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim V'shabbat kodshecha b'yahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mikadesh hashabbat. Amen.
L'chaim. Okay, we're not yet ready to do the motzi the way we used to, where we all touch each other. We're getting there. At least we're having onegs again. We're slowly crawling out of this pandemic, but we will do this on behalf of everyone. So we are symbolically touching one another.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
Have you ever heard Hebrew pronounced by like